The first thing I noticed wasn't the tea. It was my daughter's smile. Emily had always smiled with her whole face. When she was a child, it was wide and crooked, one front tooth always a little ahead of the other. When she became a woman, it softened into something warm and practiced, the kind of smile you give strangers at church or the grocery store. But that morning, standing in my kitchen with the winter sun sliding across the floor, her smile was too tight, too polished, like it had been put on in a hurry. "Mom," she said, setting a mug down in front of me, "I made this just for you." The steam curled up from the cup in slow, pale ribbons. Chamomile, I guessed, with a hint of lemon. The scent was light and sweet, almost comforting. Almost. "For me?" I asked, folding my hands in my lap. She nodded quickly. "Yeah. You didn't sleep well last night. I heard you moving around. This will help." Her husband, Paul, sat at the table behind her, pretending to scroll through his phone. He didn't look up. Not even for a second. That was the second thing I noticed. Paul usually watched me too much. Every time I talked about the house, my doctor, or my savings account, his eyes followed me like I was a ticking clock. But now, when Emily offered me the mug, he might as well have been alone in the room. I reached for the handle. Emily leaned forward just a little. "Drink it while it's still warm," she said. Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Like you talk to someone you don't want to startle. I paused. The mug was my favorite, the blue one with the chipped rim that I'd had since before Emily was born. Harold used to tease me about it. "You've got a whole cupboard of mugs, Ruth," he'd say. "But that one's the only one you ever use." He was right. There was something about familiarity that made a thing feel safe. But suddenly I didn't feel safe at all. "You didn't make one for Paul?" I asked casually. She glanced over her shoulder. "Oh. He already had coffee." Paul didn't move. His cup sat on the table, half full and untouched. I don't know why my hand did what it did next. It wasn't a thought. It was more like a quiet tug inside my chest, something old and alert, the same instinct that had once woken me in the middle of the night when Emily was a baby and about to roll off the bed. I lifted my mug, then gently set it down closer to Paul's cup. "And yours?" I asked him. "You don't want it?" He finally looked up. "What?" "The tea," I said. "It smells nice." Emily's eyes flicked to the mugs. "No, Mom," she said too quickly. "That one's yours." "I know," I said, already sliding his cup toward me and nudging mine toward him. "I just want a sip of coffee first. Mine's probably too hot anyway." I took a small swallow from his cup. Bitter. Cold. Normal. Emily's breath caught. "Mom," she said, forcing a laugh. "You're so silly." Paul stared at his phone again, but I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. We sat there for a moment. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street, tires whispering over the cold pavement. Emily finally sat down across from me. "Go on," she said, nodding at the mug now in front of Paul. "Drink." He hesitated. Just a fraction. Then he lifted the cup. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. He didn't say anything. Just set the mug down and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Good?" Emily asked. "Fine," he said. Her shoulders relaxed. Not mine. We talked about nothing. About the neighbor's dog. About the cold weather. About how the grocery store was already out of cranberry sauce. I nodded and smiled and waited. 10 minutes passed. Paul shifted in his chair. "You okay?" Emily asked. "Yeah," he said, but his voice sounded thick. "Just warm." Another 5 minutes. He rubbed his temples. "I feel weird." Emily's face went pale. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said. "Maybe you're coming down with something." Paul tried to stand. His chair scraped loudly against the tile as his knees wobbled. "I need to sit," he muttered. I stayed where I was. 20 minutes after he drank the tea. He was sweating through his shirt. 30 minutes later, he was slumped against the counter, breathing hard, his eyes unfocused. Emily was on her phone in the hallway, whispering. I sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the Christmas wreath still hanging on the back door. Red ribbon, fake pine, a dusting of glitter that always ended up on the floor. Harold had hung it there every year until he couldn't anymore. No one asked me how I felt. No one remembered that we had switched cups. When Emily came back, her face was tight with panic. "We need to get him to bed," she said. "He just overdid it last night, that's all." "Last night," I repeated. She didn't look at me. By evening, Paul was snoring on the couch. Emily kept checking his forehead like he had a fever. "You should stay the night," she said, "in case something happens." "I think I'll go home," I replied, already reaching for my coat. Her head snapped up. "Mom, it's late. You shouldn't drive." "I'm fine." She stepped in front of the door. "We had plans. Dinner. Dessert." "I'm tired." For a moment, something dark flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by a brittle smile. "Call me when you get home," she said. I drove away with my heart pounding, her figure growing smaller in the rearview mirror. 3 hours later, I was sitting alone in my kitchen, lights off, listening to the quiet. Something had changed. Not fear. Clarity. And I knew deep in my bones that the tea hadn't been meant for Paul. It had been meant for me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what might happen to Paul, though part of me did wonder what exactly Emily had stirred into that tea. I stayed awake because my mind kept replaying the morning over and over, like an old tape stuck on rewind. Her smile. The way she leaned forward. The way she tried to stop me from switching the cups. By 3 in the morning, the house felt too quiet. Harold used to say silence had a sound if you listen long enough. Now I knew what he meant. I made myself a cup of plain hot water and sat at the kitchen table. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The old oak outside scraped its bare branches against the window in the wind. At 3:17 a.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Hope you got home okay. Paul's feeling better. We think it was just the flu. Call me tomorrow." No apology. No concern for me. Just a report. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood and walked down the hallway to the spare bedroom. Harold used to call it my paper room, because it was the only place in the house I kept truly organized. A tall metal filing cabinet sat against the wall, dented from when we'd moved it years ago. Inside were our lives in folders. Mortgage, insurance, deeds, wills, bank records. I opened the bottom drawer. The folder Emily had given me last spring was still there. Pale green. My name is written neatly in black ink. She had slid it across my kitchen table with that same helpful smile. "Just some updated paperwork for the hospital, Mom. They need it on file. You know how complicated things are now." I had trusted her. I took the folder out and sat on the edge of the bed. The pages smelled faintly of printer ink and something floral. Maybe her perfume. The first page looked harmless enough. Legal language. Dense paragraphs. I adjusted my glasses and began to read slowly. By the second page, my stomach had gone cold. It wasn't hospital paperwork. It was a durable power of attorney. My name is at the top. Emily's name is below. Language that gave her full control over my finances, my property, and my medical decisions if I were ever declared incapable. Declared by whom? A doctor. A hospital. A moment of confusion. Or a cup of tea. I turned to the last page. My signature stared back at me. Rushed and slanted. Just like it always was when I signed something without really paying attention. I hadn't known what I was signing. I hadn't understood. And if that tea had made me dizzy, disoriented, confused, if I had ended up in a hospital bed slurring my words, Emily would have owned my life. I closed the folder carefully as if it might bite. At 8 a.m. I called my lawyer. "Daniel," I said when he answered, "I need to see you today." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Ruth?" "No," I said. "But it will be." He told me to come in at noon. I showered, dressed, and drove myself through falling snow to his office downtown. My hands were steady on the wheel. Daniel had been our lawyer for nearly 40 years. He'd helped Harold and me buy this house, write our wills, and settle his estate after he passed. When I walked into his office, he looked at my face and frowned. "You look tired." "I'm very awake," I said. I handed him the folder. He read in silence, adjusting his glasses twice. When he finished, he looked at me with something like sadness. "Did you know what you were signing?" "No." He nodded. "This gives your daughter extraordinary control. If you were deemed unfit, she could move you, sell your house, drain your accounts." "Not anymore," I said. I want it revoked. He slid a form across the desk. We can do that today. And I want a new one, I added. With my grandson as my agent. Daniel's eyebrows rose. Not Emily. Not Emily. We spent the next 2 hours reading and signing. Every word. Slowly. Carefully. When I left his office, the snow had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds like something hopeful. But I wasn't done. Not even close. On my way home, I stopped at the bank. Christine, the manager, recognized me. Mrs. Bennett, what can I help you with? I need a full printout of my accounts, I said. And I need to know who has access to them. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. Her face changed. There's a monthly transfer set up to an account in your daughter's name, she said slowly. $750. My jaw tightened. Since when? August. And who authorized it? She glanced at the screen. A power of attorney. That document is no longer valid, I said. Cancel it. She nodded. There are also other withdrawals. She turned the screen so I could see. Furniture stores. Medical suppliers. Cash withdrawals. Thousands of dollars. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said quietly. Christine met my eyes. No, it's not. I went home with a stack of papers under my arm and a storm in my chest. That evening my phone rang. Emily. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a text. Mom, we need to talk. I sat at the table, staring at the ledger Harold and I had kept for decades. Every expense. Every check. Every gift. Emily's handwriting appeared more and more often in the later years. Loans. Emergency money. Renovations. I had paid for her life while she planned to take mine. My phone rang again. This time it was my grandson, Tyler. Grandma, he said softly. I need to tell you something. I closed my eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Before you got to Christmas dinner, I heard Mom and Dad talking. Dad asked if everything was ready. Mom said you'd be compliant by New Year's. The room seemed to tilt. Did they see you? No. I was in the hallway. Thank you for telling me. Are you okay? I opened my eyes and stared at the window. I am now, I said. And for the first time since that morning I meant it. After Tyler hung up, I didn't cry. I thought I might. A mother always expects grief when her child betrays her. But what I felt was colder than sadness. It was the quiet, focused kind of anger that makes you very careful with your hands. I made myself a cup of tea from a brand new box I had bought on the way home from the bank. Sealed. Untouched. I watched the water turn amber and poured it into a clean mug. No one else had touched this. That mattered now. I sat at the table and spread the bank statements out in front of me. Line by line. Date. Amount. Destination. It was all there as plain as ink on paper. $750 every month. Random withdrawals. An emergency transfer of $2,000 I had never requested. I ran a finger down the page and stopped at one charge. Medical supply company. I'd never ordered anything. But I knew Emily had been talking a lot lately about how forgetful I was becoming. How I was slowing down. How might it be time to think about support? Support. I picked up the phone and called the company. A young man answered. I gave him my name. He put me on hold. When he came back, his voice was cautious. Yes, Mrs. Bennett. We have you on file for a mobility aid delivered last month. I never received anything. It was shipped to a different address. I gave him Emily's. Silence. I'm going to need a copy of that invoice, I said. And the signature. I'll email it. When it arrived, I saw Emily's name at the bottom. She was preparing a future for me where I couldn't walk into a bank on my own. I didn't call her. I didn't scream. I just kept collecting. 2 days later, Emily showed up at my door. I saw her through the window, standing on the porch with a covered casserole dish and a practiced smile. She checked her hair in the glass of her car door before walking up. I opened the door before she could knock. Mom, she said brightly. I made your favorite. What do you want? I asked. Her smile twitched. Can't I just visit my own mother? You never do. You only come when you need something. She looked hurt. Very convincing. I was worried about you. You left Christmas so suddenly. Paul was half unconscious, I said. I wouldn't trust his memory of the night. Her eyes hardened for just a second. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not confused, Emily. And I'm not signing anything. She shifted the dish in her hands. Maybe we should talk to a doctor. Just to be safe. I've already talked to someone, I said. My lawyer. And my bank. The color drained from her face. You went to the bank? I saw the transfers. The charges. The withdrawals. All of it. That was authorized, she snapped. You said we could. I never authorized theft. Her voice rose. I am not a thief. I'm your daughter. Then act like one. She stared at me, eyes blazing. You think you can just cut me off? I already have. She laughed, sharp and ugly. Who's going to believe you? Some paranoid old woman. I smiled. I have documentation, I said. And a lawyer who knows exactly what you did. She stood there shaking, the casserole cooling in her hands. You're making a huge mistake, she whispered. No, I said. I'm correcting one. I closed the door. 2 weeks later, Tyler came to see me. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from being trapped between two people you love. Mom's furious, he said. She says you've lost your mind. She would. He hesitated. Grandma, I recorded something. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the room. She wasn't supposed to switch the cups. The whole thing was ruined. Paul's low reply. So what now? We wait. She's old. People will believe us eventually. Tyler stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. I'm sorry, he said. I reached across the table and held them. You just saved me. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. The morning after Tyler played me that recording, I woke before dawn, long before the sky had even begun to change color. The house was silent in a way that felt heavy, like it was holding its breath along with me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint tick of the old clock Harold had brought back from an antique shop years ago, counting each second as it mattered. Emily thought time was her ally. She thought if she waited long enough, I would grow tired, confused, and unsure of myself. She didn't know that the more time I had, the clearer everything became. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the kitchen, careful not to turn on too many lights. The darkness felt comforting, like it was wrapping me in something protective. I made coffee and sat at the table, my hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into my bones. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry in a way that felt focused, sharp, almost calm. I spread out the papers I'd gathered over the last few days. The bank statements. The invoices. The power of attorney Emily had tricked me into signing. Tyler's recording was transcribed onto paper, every word frozen in ink. She wasn't supposed to switch the cups. The whole thing was ruined. We just need to be patient. I could still hear her voice in my head, cold and irritated, not at all like the sweet daughter she pretended to be in front of me. By 9 o'clock I was dressed and ready to leave. I drove through the quiet streets toward Daniel's office, the winter sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. The city looked ordinary. People walking dogs. Coffee shops are opening. None of them knew a war was being fought inside a small gray-haired woman's heart. Daniel was already waiting when I arrived. Ruth, he said gently, how are you holding up? I'm clear, I replied. That's all that matters. He led me into his office where a thick folder sat on the desk. My name was printed neatly on the front. These are the trust documents we discussed, he said. Everything has been prepared. I sat down, adjusting my glasses. He went through every page slowly, explaining each clause, every protection. My house, my savings, my investments. All of it was now wrapped in legal language so strong Emily could not pry it open, no matter how hard she tried. And the beneficiary? Daniel asked. Tyler, I said without hesitation. He looked at me carefully. Not your daughter? Not her. He nodded. Very well. I signed, my hand steady. For the first time since Harold died, I felt like I was truly protecting what we had built together. There's also a provision, Daniel added, that prevents Emily from contesting the trust. If she tries, she receives nothing. Good, I said. Let her know that. He slid another document across the desk. This is a formal notice outlining the changes. Certified mail. Send it. Daniel hesitated. This will end things between you. They already ended, I said. She just didn't tell me. When I left his office, the sun was brighter, the air cold and clean. It felt like I'd stepped out of a long dark tunnel. That afternoon, Emily called. I watched her name light up on my phone and let it ring until it stopped. Then she called again. And again. I didn't answer. By evening, the voicemail started coming. Her tone shifted with each one. First confused, then angry, then pleading. Mom, this isn't funny. You can't just shut me out. We need to talk. I deleted them all. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, a young woman stood there holding a clipboard. She looked professional, calm, and very tired. Mrs. Bennett? I'm from Adult Protective Services. We received a report of possible self-neglect. Of course you did, Emily, I thought. Come in, I said. I'll make tea. We sat in my living room, the sunlight filtering through the curtains. She asked me about my daily routine, my medications, my finances, my memory. I answered every question clearly. Then I handed her a folder. These are the documents showing my daughter's financial abuse, I said. And this is a recording of her admitting to trying to drug me. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This is a very detailed. I was an accountant for most of my life, I said. I keep records. She closed the folder slowly. I don't see any evidence of neglect here. In fact, you seem very capable. I am, I said. When she left, I watched her walk down my driveway, her clipboard tucked under her arm. Emily had tried to use the system against me. Now she'd alerted the very people who would protect me from her. And somewhere deep inside, I knew she was starting to realize it. Emily didn't wait long after Adult Protective Services left. 3 days later, just after noon, her car pulled into my driveway so fast the tires crunched hard against the gravel. I was standing at the kitchen sink when I saw her through the window. She sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing like she'd run up a hill. I could almost see the rage boiling behind her eyes. I didn't move. I dried my hands slowly on a dish towel and waited. When the knock came, it was sharp and angry. I opened the door. Mom, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We need to talk. About what? I asked calmly. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. About the lies you're telling. About the social worker you sent after me. About the bank freezing my access. So you noticed, I said. Her face flushed. You had no right to do this. I had every right, I replied. It's my money. My life. You're being manipulated, she snapped. That lawyer of yours, that grandson, they're turning you against me. I walked to the table and picked up a folder. Sit down. She hesitated, then dropped into a chair, crossing her arms. I slid the folder toward her. What's this? She demanded. Your handwriting. She opened it. Her eyes skimmed the pages. Bank statements. Invoices. The power of attorney. That's all authorized, she said weakly. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. She wasn't supposed to switch the cups. The whole thing was ruined. Emily froze. Paul's voice followed. So what now? We wait. She's old. People will believe us eventually. The color drained from her face. Where did you get that? She whispered. Tyler. She jumped up. He had no right. He had every right, I said. He was protecting me. You're destroying this family, she cried. You did that, I said quietly. The moment you tried to steal my life. She stared at me, breathing hard. I was just trying to help, she muttered. You were trying to control, I replied. There's a difference. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt thick, heavy. You've been cut out of my trust, I told her. Completely. Her mouth fell open. You wouldn't. I already did. She sank back into the chair, eyes burning with fury. You'll regret this, she said. One day you'll be alone. I smiled softly. I'd rather be alone than betrayed. She left without another word. 2 days later, Daniel called. She received the letter, he said. She's furious. That's fine. And Ruth? I wanted to let you know something else. Your daughter's attorney contacted me. They were fishing, trying to see if you'd made a mistake. Did I? No, he said. You made it impossible for her to touch anything. That night Tyler came over. He looked relieved, lighter than he had in weeks. Mom and Dad are fighting, he said. A lot. I'm sorry, I told him. I'm not, he replied quietly. We sat together in the living room, listening to the rain against the windows. You saved me, I said. He shook his head. You saved yourself. After Emily left that afternoon, the house felt strangely lighter. Not quieter. Quieter had always been part of it since Harold passed, but lighter, as something heavy had finally been lifted off the air. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after she drove away, staring at the spot where she'd been sitting, her anger still echoing faintly in the room. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. The days that followed were calm in a way I hadn't known for years. No frantic phone calls. No forced visits. No constant second-guessing of my own memory. I went back to living instead of surviving. I repainted the guest room. Soft cream, the color Harold always said, made a room feel warmer. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center on Tuesdays. I started volunteering at the library on Thursdays, helping children pick out books and watching their eyes light up when a story grabbed them. Tyler called every Sunday just like he always had. They moved, he told me one evening. Mom and Paul left the house. Where did they go? Arizona. Some little apartment in Phoenix. They couldn't afford the mortgage without your money. I closed my eyes for a moment. I hope they find what they're looking for. And I meant it, in the distant, quiet way you mean it when someone is no longer part of your life. Spring came early that year. The daffodils Harold had planted along the walkway bloomed bright yellow against the last patches of melting snow. I stood on the porch with my coffee one morning, watching the neighborhood wake up, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this at peace. One afternoon the doorbell rang. I opened it to a young woman holding a clipboard. Mrs. Bennett? I'm Sarah from Adult Protective Services. We're following up. I smiled. Of course. We sat in the living room. I answered her questions. Then I handed her another folder. Everything I'd gathered. Bank statements. The recording. The trust documents. She flipped through it, her expression changing from polite to impressed. You're very organized. I had to be, I said. She closed the folder. I don't see any reason for concern here. In fact, you're doing remarkably well. After she left, I made myself real tea from a sealed box I'd bought myself, and sat by the window watching the sunlight drift across the floor. Summer arrived hot and green. Tyler graduated with honors and came to visit before moving to Boston for his new job. He brought his girlfriend, Emma, who was kind and bright and looked at him with the same warmth Harold once looked at me. We had dinner on the patio. Fireflies blinked in the garden. The air smelled of jasmine. I have something for you, I said, handing Tyler an envelope. He opened it, eyes widening. Grandma. This is the house. The trust covers everything, I said. It's yours someday. When you're ready. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I promise I'll take care of it, he whispered. I know you will. On my 70th birthday, Tyler and Emma threw me a small party in the backyard. Friends from the library came. My neighbor Walter. Even Daniel and his wife stopped by. Emma gave a toast that made me cry. And Tyler gave me a framed photograph of Harold and me from our wedding day, restored and colorized. I found it in the attic, he said. Thought you'd want it where you can see it. I hung it over the fireplace. That night, when the house was quiet again, I stood in front of that photo. I did it, I whispered. I kept what we built. I could almost hear Harold's voice. I never doubted you. A year later, Tyler told me Emily had tried to send him a check. He tore it up. She's trying to buy her way back, he said. That's her choice, I replied. You get to make yours. One winter morning, I sat on the porch watching the sunrise paint the snow pink and gold. The oak tree stood bare, its branches reaching toward the sky like open hands. I was 71 years old. I had been betrayed. I had been underestimated. And I had won. Not with shouting. Not with violence. But with clarity, courage, and quiet strength. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and stepped out into the cold morning. The world was still there. And so was I,